All right, guys, part 5 of the presentation I gave at the Cosmic Summit, and I'm kind of picking up where I left off last time. I was talking about Ray Kaczorowski's 1977 PhD paper on the relationship between Carolina Bays and Oriented Lakes, which was never peer-reviewed, and we'll get back into that. And the reason why this is so important is because this 1977 dissertation paper is like the backbone. It's the bottom assumption that a whole series of assumptions have been stacked on top of. And that's really, from 1977 on. And there's some big problems with that paper, and let me get into some of those. And just to recap, remember what he did was he started off with a sand table and a circular depression, almost like you take a bowl and depress it into the sand table, and then you fill that up with water. Now that right away from the very beginning sets up a bias, because that means that we have to assume that every single one of these Carolina bays started off as a circular depression full of water. And again, I don't know about you guys, but a circular depression is the definition of what a crater is, and the whole purpose of them relating these to Oriented Lakes is to get away from a catastrophic explanation. But he started with a crater and started from there. Then he took a fan and he blew a directional wind across that water for 15 minutes in one direction, went 180 degrees into the opposite direction, blew it the other way, and did that for 4 hours. Now, it's unclear why he went 180 degrees. We think that it's to perhaps cover the seasonal variation of winds that we have, where during one season we get winds from one direction, the other season we get from another direction. But that's kind of the point of bringing this up, is that those are unnatural conditions, and that's what they were using to prove that the Carolina Bays were Oriented Lakes, is by starting with these unnatural conditions to begin with. Not only that, but they neglected so many environmental variables that would go into creating the shape, the resulting shape of this experiment. And again, they're trying to show that this is going to result in an ellipse, which is what we find for a very large percentage of these Carolina Bays. And one of the things that we stress as a science educator like myself is the importance of variables in an experiment, because any change to any variable is going to lead to a difference in your outcome. And so that's important to keep track of all of these different variables. And I kind of joked during the presentation that, anything that could change your outcome should be considered, even like a sleeping pack of pachyderms, a group of mega mammals, just trying to hide out from this crazy winds that appear to be happening during that time. And that would change. That would give us a different shape, a different effect. And that's not what we see with these Carolina Bays. And I give other examples here, like local geography, the vegetation, the biology that was taking place during the Ice Age or whenever this took place. But any change to any variable would give you a different outcome. And that is what we see with the Oriented Lakes. If you go to the Oriented Lakes, which we'll get into later, but get into the Oriented Lakes of Alaska and Siberia and all the places that they're going to compare Carolina Bays to, those are true Oriented Lakes, and they have all kinds of shapes and sizes. But when it comes to these Carolina Bays, that's not what we see. We see elliptical shapes over and over and over again. And on top of that, the outcome of his experiment did not even create a Carolina Bay. It created this wonky, football shape, which is not an ellipse. But in his paper, he called that an ellipse, and that's what they went with. And again, for 47 years, that has been, the dominant go-to academic explanation for how these Carolina Bays formed. Gradual wind, or actually very strong winds over ponded water for a very long period of time would give us these elliptical depressions, and that I don't get it. I don't get it. And this is so much the explanation for these Carolina Bays that guys like Dr. Christopher Moore has even put together presentations, titled Kaczorowski was right about the Carolina Bays, and I just, like I said, there's just so much missing from that explanation, and to have that being the go-to explanation for Carolina Bays is beyond me. And keep in mind that Dr. Christopher Moore, he is the director of the Comet Research Group at this time, right now, when I'm recording this. He's the go-to guy for the Comet Research Group. So, he's already stuck his neck out and is all on board with, a younger Dryas impact event. They've been finding proxy evidence for over 10 years now. But when it comes to the Carolina Bays being created by an impact, he's not on board with that. I think I know why, and we'll get into that a little bit later. It kind of goes back to it not being possibly related to the younger Dryas, but regardless, he's out, and I even I've had some conversations with him in the past. It's like it's almost like you've gone to the very edge of a diving board and you just won't jump. You won't take that leap. When it comes to a catastrophic explanation for the Carolina Bays. But then, of course, me being me, I sent Dr. Moore this video of the I think it was the 2015 Filipino diving team, the Olympic Filipino diving team, which turned out to be a pretty catastrophic event for these guys. I'm not going to play the video here, but if you've seen it before, you know what I'm talking about. Total carnage. And so again, that kind of leaves us, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at a catastrophic event, something that happened very suddenly, or is this something that happened over thousands and thousands of years, as like Dr. Moore and the rest of that crowd suggests? And in fact, right in the middle of this screen where that pin is, that's Herndon Bay. And Herndon Bay has been heavily studied by Dr. Moore. In fact, that's the bay that they claim has migrated over tens of thousands of years, that it has been pushing itself back without changing its shape. And again, I find it very hard to believe. And this is Herndon Bay, and that whole entire area, looking at it with LiDAR. And as you can see from that image, the whole entire place is covered with these elliptical shaped depressions with raised sandy rims. And if we have to assume that Herndon Bay or any of the other ones were formed by gradualistic processes of wind blowing over ponded water, every single one of those depressions had to have been formed under the same exact environmental variables. And I cannot get on board with that. I do not see, I can't understand how this could be the dominant hypothesis for how these Carolina Bays formed. Again, every single time for every single one of these, it would have to be exactly the same. And that is not what we see with these Carolina Bays. And I could see why they would want to go with a wind and water explanation, because some of the very first Carolina Bays ever found were found in the Cape Fear River Valley. And we see from this image that some of these elliptical depressions are full of water. But again, when we look at it underneath LiDAR, we see that they're all over the place. There are tons of them that aren't full of water. And so the explanation of wind and water to me just isn't cutting it. Not for every single one of these Carolina Bays. There are way too many environmental variables and conditions that would be different in a natural environment, whether they be in a river valley like this or up on some old terraces like we see over here. Just that alone would be enough to give us different shapes for these Carolina Bays. Again, not what we see. They are all, or a vast majority of them, are elliptical depressions. The ones that are different are more than likely different because of other variables that occurred after they were formed. And so when we come back, we are going to be looking at these pseudo-Carolina Bays, the comparisons that often get brought up when Carolina Bays are mentioned, while the Carolina Bays are the dominant feature. They're all over the place. All the other ones, things like the thermal karst lakes, the playa lakes, the kettle lakes, the karst sinkholes, the deflation hollows, all of these that get brought up with the Carolina Bays, those are pseudo Carolina Bays. All right, we'll get into that when we come back.